I'm Professor Steve Ross, and I'm a historian and teaches at the University of Southern California, and I'm the author of Hitler in Los Angeles, How Jews Foiled Nazi Plots Against Hollywood and America.
The story of the German agents, the operatives, the essentially a fifth column here in America who were loyal to Germany. Is LA unique in that regard?
No, you had Nazi groups throughout the country, in New York, in Chicago, in Cleveland, all around America. What was unique about LA is the resistance, that it was a more significant resistance of foiling virtually every Nazi plot to murder Jews, to blow up military installations, and to sabotage aircraft factories in LA.
Now, how on board was Hollywood in the war effort early in the war?
Very on board. They were talking about this since 1938. You had people who were already preparing screenplays that would promote ethnic, religious, racial harmony. A number of Jewish producers were preparing for what they knew would be an inevitable war, and preparing films that would have themes that would make Americans feel good about fighting a war against Nazism and fascism, fighting a war against hate and murder.
The Jews who created Hollywood, as the book title goes, were refugees from Europe, but many wanted to forget their European identity or try to cover it up. Is that right?
Yes and no. Privately, they kept their European identity, but in terms of business, business is business. Yeah. And being a Jew with a heavy accent and a long European name didn't necessarily work for some of them. Yeah. And they understood if they're going to go into this country, into a Protestant country, a Christian country, then they felt they had to keep their Judaism under wraps, particularly since they were making movies for a non-Jewish population.
Sure. And they kept that quiet in the movies which they made. They didn't make, of course, at the time, I guess it wasn't conventional to have Jewish topics or Jewish characters, was it?
No, they kept the Jews out, but it was very peculiar because in the 30s and 40s what you had was an industry where Jews are making movies for Protestants that are being censored by Catholics, only in America.
But when it came to understanding the fascists and Germany's influence in the U.S., did they step up in concern for anti-Semitism and the fate of European Jewry?
Well, again, you have public and you have private. Privately, they were donating hundreds of thousands of dollars for European causes, for refugees, bringing people over. But publicly, they couldn't make any anti-Nazi movies because of the Production Code Administration said you can't make, according to Article or Section 10, you can't make any movie that mocks, denigrates, or in any way diminishes a foreign leader, a foreign people, or a foreign nation. And so they couldn't attack Hitler, they couldn't attack Germany, they couldn't attack Franco, they couldn't attack Italy. And it wasn't until 1939, April 1939, when Warner Brothers released Confessions of a Nazi Spy, that they made the first anti-Nazi movie. And the only reason they could do that is it was based on a true story of a Nazi spy ring that was brought to trial in New York City. So they told the story of the spy ring, and that passed the code because it wasn't fiction, it was reporting on something that had actually happened. And it wasn't until after January 1940 that the production code said, well, now you can make movies. They eliminated that section. You can make movies attacking foreign nations or leaders. And that's when Hollywood started making anti-Nazi films.
How did Germany influence German Americans to support Germany against America?
Well, they weren't doing that after Pearl Harbor. They were doing that before Pearl Harbor. They were doing it through the Bund, they were doing it through German societies, through the Turnverein, and basically arguing that you should feel proud of what they referred to as the New Germany, that Hitler was making Germany great again, and that many German Americans and German emigres took pride in that. And they thought that Hitler was the tough leader that Germany and the world needed. And Germany was sending in propaganda. They were sending in magazines, newspapers, even though it was illegal to do this because they didn't register it, they did it anyway. And most of it was coming through the ports of L.A., which were totally unguarded, unlike the ports of New York, where Mayor LaGuardia, who was half Jewish, made sure that those ports were closely watched for any German spies, German money, or German propaganda coming through.
With so much of Islam turned against Israel and America, is it unrealistic for America to tone down the Muslims who they allowed to immigrate, who might be future saboteurs?
I don't know how you can ever tone something down, because you have the Bill of Rights, you have the First Amendment of free speech, and so the question is, do you begin fiddling with free speech to stop a few people and that the vast majority have to suffer?
No, what I'm asking is immigration from countries that can't properly vet the immigrants.
I think you've got, that is a problem that is, well, as they say, well beyond my pay grade, because how do you vet people who are going to lie? If I'm coming in and I'm bent on violence, I'm not going to tell immigration authorities. Yeah. It's a very difficult, and I have no idea what the solution is. Yeah. And
the people who served as spies were Christian Americans?
Oh, yes, they were all Christian Americans, and most of them were war veterans. And they said we had fought... War veterans. We had fought a war for democracy. We didn't fight a war for hate, for discrimination, and for death.
Yeah, yeah. Righteous Gentiles, as they were called.
Righteous Gentiles they were. And they were incredibly courageous, because it was not just the men, it was men and their wives joined as husband and wife teams. And all of them risked their lives. And without doing a spoiler alert here, 3 of Leon Lewis's spies died under highly suspicious circumstances. So there was a cost to spying on Nazis.
Mm-hmm. But in New York, it must have been strong.
I would imagine New York was the strongest place of Nazism in America.
Long Island?
Long Island, yes, where the saboteurs landed in trying to invade, and they were foiled as well.
Ultimately, were there U-boats off the American coast during World War II?
Oh, yes. And we managed to capture a bunch of them.
So many people think that if we had just, even if we pulled out of World War II, that Germany would have stopped at the European border and America would have been safe.
No way. If Hitler had conquered Europe, he would have set his sights on America. And here in the Pacific Palisades, his supporters were building Hitler's Western White House, where he would control America because it would be halfway between Berlin and Tokyo. And they built a compound with 22 bedrooms, with boardrooms, with meeting rooms. They had their own electricity, their own power supply, their own water supply, their own fruits, their own meat lockers. They were going to be self-sustaining, and this is where they would run America. There is no way Hitler was going to allow America to remain neutral.
Mm-hmm. But in the Amazon series, The Man in the High Castle, they show Japan running the western part of the United States. Would that not have occurred?
Hitler wasn't going to allow anyone to do anything unless he wanted it to. He would have controlled America, not Japan.
So that's a fiction for television.
It is a fiction. Yeah. It's a Bubameister. Read the real stuff. Read my book. Yeah. This is much more frightening than that. That's BS. This really happened. Folks should be paying attention to what actually happened and learn from the past so that it doesn't happen again.
Could it happen again?
It's happening.
Your book, is it a school textbook, or how can people come by it?
Well, it's been on the bestseller list for 21 weeks, so I would say it's well beyond the school textbook. It's been a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 2018 in history. It's in paperback now. People can get it at if they're local bookstores. If they're in L.A., Book Soup always has copies. You can get it from Amazon or Barnes & Noble or anywhere online, and it's in paperback, and it's also in audiobook, and you can download it onto an iPad or Kindle.
Oh, you can...
Yes. It's an e-book. Yes, it's written as what they call a trade book. It is for a mass audience. It's not an academic book.
And the title again?
Hitler in Los Angeles, How Jews Foiled Nazi Plots Against Hollywood and America.